Okay, good morning, folks, and welcome back to your favorite class. We are in lesson 1.9, method signatures. So you've already been using methods, but maybe you haven't realized it. These are also sometimes called functions in computer science. And so they call this section here methods and procedural abstraction. So abstraction meaning we want to package some instructions in together and just reuse them and just call those instructions. We want to abstract them away. So when we're building more complex programs, we don't get lost in thousands of lines of code. So you've been using methods such as print line. You've been using methods with the turtle like turn and forward. And sometimes those methods have what we call arguments, where you pass it some data, like turn, and then you give it the number of degrees that you want it to turn. Sometimes so if you're using system.out.println, you're passing it some information, which is what do you need it to print? You're passing it a string. Sometimes methods don't need arguments. You just call it, use it, so you say its name, and it will do something. So we'll get into this here with this example here with Old MacDonald Had a Farm. So you're going to get to hear me sing, which is just a special treat. So you might want to put on some earphones if you don't have them already. Okay, so you know this song, Old MacDonald Had a Farm. Instead of printing all these lines over and over again, we want it to be a little more dynamic, and we want it to package stuff together that goes together. So let's look at some code. As you know, we've been using public static void main, and that's where execution begins. I've added this other method or function called intro. And you can see apparently what it does is it prints out Old MacDonald Had a Farm. But if I were to run this right now, nothing would happen. And that's because execution starts in main and there's nothing there except a comment. But I can do what's called, I'm going to call the method intro. And we just say its name and we use parentheses. That's how we know it's a method. So when I do this, it's going to say, Old MacDonald had a farm. And that's it. Non-static method. Okay, so when you get this error, I'm glad this actually happened. The fix for this is I need to make this static. So non-static method intro cannot be referenced from a static context. So main here is static, and this is not. So I'm going to make this one static, and that error is going to go away. Don't worry for now if you don't know what that means. So Old MacDonald had a farm. Okay, so far really simple and not very powerful. Our chorus then is going to be EIEIO, right? So I want another method for that. So public static void chorus. And all this is going to do is print out EIEIO. Okay, and if we do intro and then chorus, then we're going to get both of those things. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And then we need to add an animal in there, right? And on that farm, there was a cow. So that's going to be in a verse. And let's add another method for verse. Public static void verse. And here we're going to print, and on that farm, there was a cow. And then it's supposed to say with a moo here and a moo there. So let's copy this with a moo here and a moo there. what is it? Here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo. I think that's what it is. Here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo. Something like that. Okay, so then we want to do the intro and then the chorus and then the verse. And then I think it goes back to the chorus, right? So you can reuse this, right? You can do chorus as many times as you need to. And this is obviously a really simple and silly example, but you can see how this is going to be a little easier to look at than a bunch of these lines, especially when we start adding more verses. So let's run that. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm there was a cow with a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, and here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo, E-I-E-I-O. I think that's how it goes. Oh, it's supposed to be Old MacDonald had a farm again, and then E-I-E-I-O. Oh, and I kind of screwed up the verse, didn't I? On this farm, they had a cow, E-I-E-I-O. Okay, so let's go fix that. So on this farm, there was a cow. So here, actually, we want to call the chorus. It seems like every verse has, we're going to say the animal and then the chorus, and then a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there. And then this is like the intro again, really. In fact, I think the intro is always going to call the chorus. Ooh, I don't know why it's highlighting. I've never seen that. So what we could do then is go back to the intro and just call the chorus from the intro. Instead of, then we don't need to call it here. So every time it says Old MacDonald had a farm, it'll also do the chorus. But we want chorus separate because sometimes we only call the chorus. So intro, verse, chorus. Let's see how that works. Yep, that's how it's supposed to work. Okay, but I want to make one more change. So hang with me here. This won't be too long. But we want this to be more dynamic because there's going to be a cow and then there's going to be a chicken. There's going to be a something else, right? So I want this verse to accept a parameter, or I've been calling it an argument, so that it can be more dynamic and it's not always a cow. The other thing I could do is, have a cow verse and then copy this and have a chicken verse, but I want it to be more dynamic. So we're going to write into the method signature here, right? Here this is just defining the method. Here is where I call it, down here where the execution is actually happening. So I want to change the structure of this method called verse, and I want it to take a parameter of the animal. So I'm going to say string animal. So then instead of saying there was a cow, I'm going to say there was a animal. So the animal becomes like a variable, and I'm going to use the name of it here. You see, now I have a verse here, and it says method verse in class main cannot be applied to given types. And the issue here is it's saying it requires a string, but it found no arguments. So when I call it, I need to give it a string. I need to tell it what kind of animal this is. So I say cow here, and then it receives that. So it kind of passes this data cow to the method here, and it receives it and stores it temporarily in a place called animal. And then it will use it here. It's going to print it out. So let's see that in action. It's not going to look any different, but we're just making sure it works. On that farm, there was a cow. So I could change this then, obviously, to chicken or anything I want. And there it is. So that makes it so I can reuse this same verse, the same method verse with any animal. But I do need to change one more thing. I also need, because a chicken's not going to moo, I need another parameter that is the sound or the word of the sound. So string sound. And then I don't want to say a moo. I want to do sound. Plus sound. And actually it needs to be twice, doesn't it? Because it's moo. Moo here and a moo there. So I would need to do this again. Sound plus sound. Here a moo. So let's put another one here. Gets a little tedious having to do all of these strings. Plus sound plus everywhere sound. And I don't need that there, do I? Everywhere a moo. Okay. Now when I call it, so a chicken's going to make a cluck sound. Okay, so here's how you would call it. You give it the first string. They just go in order, right? So the first string I give it is going to be the first argument, or it'll be received as the first parameter, animal. The second argument here, cluck, it's received as the second parameter here, sound. And you separate them with a comma. Okay, so let's run that and make sure it works. So chicken, cluck, cluck here, and cluck, cluck there. Okay, so that's working well. So then you could see we could call verse again and go back to a cow and a moo. And we could obviously add as many animals as we wanted to. Okay, should we sing it? Everyone now. Just kidding. So cow, moo, chicken, cluck, cluck. So it's obviously that's much more powerful when we can reuse a method that accepts parameters. And just a difference on the terminology, parameter versus argument. It's a really technical distinction, but I want to make sure that I tell you. Here, these are arguments. Chicken and cluck are arguments. So when I call the verse, I have to give it the required arguments. Here, animal and sound are called parameters. So in the method header or the use of the animal and sound themselves here, these are parameters. These here are called arguments. And if a function or a method requires these arguments, you have to give it those arguments or it's not going to work. It won't even compile. Okay, so you're going to work through the stuff on here today. And you might want to do that with a friend, or you could do it on your own. And then I'll post on the classroom also the assignment. But I am thinking I want to have you do something with this again, where you're going to go back to this code and now rewrite it with methods. So make a method that will draw one of these shapes and think about what parameters it will need to accept. Will it need any? Maybe it won't. So maybe it's just going to do the stuff to draw one of these shapes. But you could also remember the polygon, like the triangle, the square, the pentagon. That's an example of a method that probably should accept a parameter or two. You might want to have it do num sides, like how many sides is the shape supposed to have, and maybe side length as well. So I think that's going to be your task for today, but I'll post detailed instructions in this assignment.